When I moved to my new apartment, I was excited. It was my first place after college, nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The building was old, with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper, but it felt cozy. My neighbors seemed friendly enough, at least on the surface. I often exchanged pleasantries in the hallway, but there was one neighbor I never met. Apartment 3B remained a mystery. The door was always closed, and no sounds ever emerged from within. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of a shadow moving behind the frosted glass, but I never saw anyone come or go. I asked my other neighbors about them, but they would shrug and change the subject, their expressions turning serious.
"Just leave them be,"
one neighbor advised, his voice dropping to a whisper.
"You don't want to disturb them."
I brushed it off as small-town oddity until one stormy night. Curiosity got the better of me. The wind howled outside, rattling the old windows, and I found myself staring at the closed door of 3B, the darkness behind it beckoning. My heart raced as I approached, a mix of fear and intrigue propelling me forward. I knocked softly. "Hello? Is anyone home?" Silence greeted me, thick and suffocating. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a faint shuffling from inside, like something heavy moving. I knocked again, more insistently this time, and waited.
"Who's there?"
A voice came from the other side, low and raspy. "I'm your neighbor from 3A. I just wanted to say hi." There was a long pause before the voice replied.
"Hi? Why?"
I didn't know how to answer. Just wanted to introduce myself. It's nice to meet you."
"Nice,"
the voice echoed, but it sounded hollow.
"I don't get many visitors."
Maybe we can talk sometime. I'd love to know more about you, I offered, trying to sound friendly despite my growing unease.
"No,"
the voice hissed.
"I don't think you should come back here."
Before I could respond, I heard the sound of a lock clicking. The door creaked open just a fraction, and I was hit with a gust of stale air. I peered inside, but the darkness seemed impenetrable. I caught a glimpse of something. Was it a figure standing in the shadows? I backed away, heart pounding, the strange feeling that I had disturbed something deeper. Okay, no problem. Just let me know if you need anything. I hurried back to my apartment, locking the door behind me, my mind racing with questions. Who lived there? What did they want? But over the next few days, I tried to forget about my bizarre encounter. As the week dragged on, strange things began happening. My belongings would be slightly out of place. Once I found my favorite coffee mug in the hallway outside my apartment. I chalked it up to absent-mindedness, but the uneasy feeling in my gut grew stronger. Then came the sounds. At night, I would lie in bed unable to sleep, listening to a rhythmic tapping coming from 3B. It was unsettling, like nails scratching against the wood. I tried to ignore it, but it seeped into my dreams, twisting them into nightmares filled with dark figures and whispers. One night, unable to bear it any longer, I gathered my courage and knocked on the door again. This time, the tapping stopped. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is everything okay?" A pause. Then the door creaked open. The shadowy figure of a person loomed in the darkness. Their face was obscured, but I could feel their eyes boring into me.
"You came back?"
The voice hissed, filled with an unsettling mix of surprise and menace. "I just wanted to see if you were all right," I stammered, taking a step back. "You've been making some strange noises." A low chuckle echoed from within, making my skin crawl.
"It's not my fault. They don't like it when I talk. They want me to stay quiet."
I could barely understand the words. Who wants you to stay quiet?"
"They come at night. They don't want you to know I'm here,"
the figure murmured.
"They can smell you."
My heart raced, a primal fear flooding my senses. "Who are you talking about?" Suddenly, the door swung wide open, revealing the full extent of the darkness inside. I could see shapes moving, dark and amorphous, shifting against the walls. I wanted to run, but I felt paralyzed, trapped in the gaze of that shadowy figure.
"They want you,"
it whispered, its voice dripping with malice.
"They've been watching you, waiting just like they waited for me.
In that moment, realization struck me like a lightning bolt. I turned to flee, but the figure lunged, grabbing my arm with a grip that felt like iron.
You can't leave, it screeched. You're already part of them.
With a surge of adrenaline, I wrenched myself free and bolted down the hall. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, slamming the door shut and locking it tight. The sounds from 3B resumed, louder and more frantic, like a cacophony of voices urging me to join them. I stayed up all night, terrified of what might happen next. As dawn broke, I cautiously peeked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Weeks passed without incident, but the dread lingered. I began to notice more missing items. Small things at first, but they kept disappearing. My sanity frayed at the edges, and I knew I had to leave the apartment. The day I moved out, I caught one last glimpse of 3B as I hurried past. The door was slightly ajar, and a pair of eyes glinted in the darkness, watching me leave. As I drove away, I thought I was free, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still there, waiting, always watching. I never returned to that neighborhood, but sometimes at night, when I'm alone in my new place, I can still hear the distant tapping echoing in the back of my mind, a chilling reminder of the unseen neighbor who never truly let go. It started with a phone call, just a regular, everyday moment that turned into something I can't explain. It was around 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, half watching a rerun of some sitcom I'd seen a dozen times. My phone buzzed, and the screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me pick up. Hello? There was silence on the other end. Not static, just the kind of quiet that feels intentional. Then a voice spoke, soft and distant, like it was coming from the other side of a long tunnel.
Is this Sarah?
I frowned. No. I think you have the wrong number. The voice hesitated, then said,
Are you sure?
That caught me off guard. Yeah, I'm sure. Sorry. I hung up, feeling a little unsettled. A few minutes later, the phone buzzed again. Same number. I let it ring this time, watching the screen until it stopped. A voicemail notification popped up almost immediately. Against my better judgment, I listened.
Sarah,
The voice said, more insistent now.
why aren't you answering? You said you'd help me. Please, don't leave me here.
A chill ran through me. I deleted the voicemail, convincing myself it was some desperate stranger who dialed the wrong number. It happens, right? The next day at work, I got another call. Same number. I was in the middle of a meeting and declined it. But my phone vibrated seconds later with another voicemail. I didn't listen to it until I was home. This time, the voice sounded different, less distant, more urgent.
Sarah, you promised. I can't do this alone. You have to come back.
My stomach nodded. I wasn't Sarah. I didn't know this person. Why did they keep calling me? That night, I dreamed of a woman standing in the middle of a dark, empty street. Her face was pale and blurry, like a photograph that hadn't developed properly. She was crying, but her sobs were soundless, her shoulders shaking in silence. When she looked up at me, her eyes were dark holes, endless and hollow. I woke up gasping, the sheets damp with sweat. My phone was on the nightstand, buzzing with another call. Same number. This time I answered. "Listen," I snapped. "I don't know who you think I am, but you've got the wrong person. Stop calling me." The silence stretched so long, I almost thought they'd hung up. Then the voice whispered,
You're lying.
A cold wave of fear washed over me. "I'm not."
You said you wouldn't leave me.
The voice cut in, louder now, angry.
You said you'd help me, Sarah.
"I'm not Sarah," I yelled, slamming the phone down. But the calls didn't stop. Over the next few days, they came at random times. Early in the morning, during my lunch break, in the middle of the night. Each time, the voicemails grew more frantic, the voice more desperate.
Why are you doing this to me? I need you, Sarah. It's so dark. It's so cold.
By Friday, I was barely functioning. My coworkers noticed I was distracted. My boss pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay. I lied, told her I wasn't sleeping well, But the truth was, I was terrified. That night, the call came again. But this time, when I picked up, it wasn't the voice I'd grown used to. It was deeper, harsher, with an edge of something inhuman.
Sarah's dead.
I froze. My mouth went dry, and my voice came out as a whisper.
What? Sarah's dead.
It repeated.
And you're next.
I dropped the phone like it had burned me, my chest tightening as panic set in. I thought about calling the police. But what could I say? That some random voice on the phone was threatening me? They dismissed me as paranoid. I barely slept that night. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my bedroom door. My heart stopped. I lived alone. Hello? I called out, my voice trembling. The footsteps stopped. Then, slowly, the doorknob turned. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering to the operator that someone was in my apartment. The seconds felt like hours as I stared at the door, waiting for it to open. But it never did. By the time the police arrived, the apartment was empty. No signs of forced entry. No evidence that anyone else had been there. But my phone was lying on the nightstand. Screen lit up with a new voicemail notification. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The police officers were still there, checking the locks and windows. So I played the voicemail on speaker. The voice was different again. Calm, cold, and deliberate.
Why did you call them? They can't help you. No one can.
I dropped the phone, my stomach twisting in knots. One of the officers picked it up, frowning at the screen.
Miss, are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you didn't just
Imagine the call? I grabbed the phone from him, furious. You heard it too? He exchanged a glance with his partner, who shrugged.
There's nothing on the voicemail,
the second officer said, holding up a small audio recorder.
I recorded what you played. It's just silence.
I snatched the phone back and played the voicemail again, desperate for them to hear it. But they were right. This time, it was nothing but empty static. My skin crawled. The officers gave me a tired look, told me to lock my doors, and left. I stayed awake the rest of the night, clutching a kitchen knife and staring at my phone, waiting for it to buzz again. It didn't. The next day, I tried to go about my life, pretending the calls had stopped, that things were back to normal. But everything felt wrong. People on the subway seemed to stare at me for too long. The cashier at the grocery store flinched when I handed her my money, as though I'd brushed her hand with something freezing. By the time I got home, the air in my apartment felt heavier, stifling. The second I walked in, I knew I wasn't alone. "Who's there?" I called, gripping the knife I'd started carrying in my bag. No response, just that oppressive silence, the kind that almost had weight to it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but curiosity or fear got the better of me. I looked at the screen. The number wasn't the one I'd gotten used to. This one wasn't even a number. It was just zeros, a string of endless zeros. I answered. "What do you want from me?" The voice that answered was distorted, layered with static, like 100 people speaking at once.
You lied. You said you'd help her.
"I don't know Sarah," I shouted. "I don't know who she is or what this is about."
You're lying again.
The voice hissed, and suddenly, the lights in my apartment flickered. The temperature dropped, my breath clouding in the air. Then, a whisper came from behind me, close, too close.
She's here.
I spun around, knife raised, but the room was empty. My phone slipped from my hands, clattering to the floor. The screen was still lit, the call still connected. And then I saw it. My reflection in the darkened TV screen across the room. Except it wasn't my reflection. It was a woman, pale and blurry, her eyes dark and hollow like the dream. She was standing right behind me, her mouth moving in soundless words. I tried to run, but the door slammed shut on its own. The lights flickered wildly, and the phone on the floor began to buzz uncontrollably. I scrambled to pick it up, but before I could, the screen went black. The apartment fell silent again, but not empty. The air grew thick, pressing against me, and then I heard it. A faint whisper coming from every direction.
Sarah lied. Sarah lied. Sarah lied.
I screamed, banging on the door, trying to get it open. Finally, it gave, and I stumbled into the hallway, where my neighbor stared at me, wide-eyed. "Are you okay?" she asked. But when she looked past me into the apartment, her face paled. She stepped back, shaking her head. Don't go back in there," she said, her voice trembling. Whatever you brought in with you, it's not leaving. I never went back. I moved in with a friend the next day, leaving everything behind. The call stopped for a while, but sometimes, late at night, I feel my phone vibrate, even when it's turned off. I don't answer anymore. But last week, I woke up to a new voicemail. The number was zeros again. I deleted it without listening. Or at least, I thought I did. Because sometimes, when I'm alone, I still hear the voice. And it's not asking for Sarah anymore. It's asking for me. "21 steps. That's how many steps there were from the bottom to the top. No more, no less. I know the number exactly, because Mother always made sure I tiptoed down the stairs gently. She told me that the monster in the cupboard below might hear me if I was too loud. I lived with my mother and her sister, Auntie Cheryl. Our family isn't big. It was just us. They always told me that a family of 3 is a perfect size. And it rang true in our actions. We did everything together. We had a movie night every week. We were a true and happy family. At least, that was before Mother got sick. When I was 6, I remember Mother and Auntie Cheryl having a huge argument. I don't know what it was about, but I remember sitting at the top of the stairs, hearing them screaming at each other. This was before the quiet footsteps rule. Yet, even so, I still tread down the stairs lightly. I didn't want them to hear me, but I wanted to hear them. I heard something about Dad. He died when I was a baby. I heard something about Auntie Cheryl sleeping. I couldn't understand what was going on. The shouting was so loud that it became white noise. Deciphering exact words wasn't possible. It was the same day that Mother got sick. I always thought that the fighting with her sister is what caused it. Everyone deserves love from their family. Ever since that fight, she was practically bedridden. She would get up to go toilet, but besides that, she relied on me for everything. I had to stay upstairs that whole weekend. Auntie Cheryl never came up once to check on us. I hated her for it at first, but Mother reminded me that this was not my fight. I still had a loving auntie, and I shouldn't let their fight affect how I see her. I didn't go downstairs at all until Sunday afternoon, when Auntie Cheryl arrived home in a wheelchair. She had gotten into an accident and broken both of her legs. She told me the fight had been playing on her and left her distracted, and that it was the final time she would let something get to her head. She seemed surprisingly okay for someone who had just lost the ability to walk. But Auntie Cheryl was always a jolly person. That same day, 2 rules were introduced to the household. First, I could no longer have friends over. Having a sick mother meant that she needed rest, not 2 kids running around the house. Second, I had to walk slowly down the stairs. She really drove it into me. Auntie Cheryl agreed too. The monsters would get me if I were too loud on the stairs. 3 years of this went by, always being quiet on the stairs, never having friends round the house. Auntie Cheryl and Mother never spoke to each other, not even once. One was stuck downstairs in their wheelchair, the other stuck upstairs in their bed. I never knew for sure whether their lack of mobility drove them apart, or whether they refused to talk after the fight. I found it best not to think about it. It became the new normal for me. I always had someone to talk to, whichever room I was in. It just depended on which floor I was on. Every day, it would take me a whole minute to get up or down the stairs. I had to make sure that not so much as a creak came from those floorboards, for fear of the monster hearing me. I'd always count the steps, one at a time. 21 steps. The number, of course, never changed, but it distracted me from the horrors below the stairs. I always tried to get Mother and Auntie Cheryl to talk, especially on Christmas. The most I ever got was for one of them to shout, "Hello," to the other. There was no response. It made me sad, but I was still grateful to have such a loving household. I loved them both, and they loved me back. They cared for me, and I cared for them, where I could. I remember one night, slowly going down the stairs in the middle of the night to get a glass of water. Mother was sleeping. As soon as I opened the kitchen door, I heard a loud bang coming from the living room. I thought it was the monster at first, before realizing it must be Auntie Cheryl still awake. I walked into the living room through the darkness, and I saw a shadowy figure standing in the middle of the room. I froze in fear. It was much taller than I was. I knew that it must be the monster. It seemed to look at me quickly as I reached for the light switch. It was not there once the darkness had left. I had scared it off. On the floor, however, in its place, was Auntie Cheryl. She had fallen. I cried to her, terrified that the monster had tried to get her. "If I wasn't here, he would have taken you," I cried. "I saw him right here, where you're lying." She calmed me down. She was always good at that. She assured me she had fallen herself, and that nobody else was in the room. I helped her back into her chair. It was too late, though. I was determined that the monster had stopped playing by the rules. It was going to take one of us. I just knew it. I had to do something. Secretly, over the next few days, I collected weapons, or at least a kid's idea of weapons. A baseball bat, a torch, a biker's helmet. Everything I thought I would need to kill this monster. At 2 a.m., when I knew Mother and Auntie Cheryl would both be sleeping, I snuck downstairs. Slowly, slowly, slowly. One step at a time. All the way to 21. Once downstairs, I looked at the cupboard under the stairs. It was taller than me. It hadn't been opened in years. I knew that behind this door was the monster. I turned the torch on, and before I could give it a second thought, I swung the door open. It was empty. The light filled every corner of the cupboard, yet it was only occupied with dust. I ran into the living room to check on Auntie Cheryl. It was empty. Her chair in the middle of the room, with nobody sitting there. I had never seen the chair empty before. I ran upstairs in tears to tell Mother. "The monster has Auntie Cheryl. Mother, I was too late." She woke up confused, almost immediately turning to anger. "You went downstairs without me knowing?" "What do you mean? I never tell you when I'm going downstairs." "No, but..." She calmed down and changed her tone. "Auntie Cheryl is staying at a friend's house tonight. She'll be back in the morning." She was very adamant about this. She brought me back to my bedroom. and told me I was getting too worked up. She kissed me on the forehead and said goodnight. I knew she was lying, but I didn't know why. I was terrified. I thought the monster had somehow possessed Mother. I secretly called the police once I was sure Mother was asleep. I told them that my Auntie Cheryl was missing, and that I think a monster had gotten her. They were confused, of course, but they knocked on the door half an hour later for questioning. Mother was absolutely furious at me. She told me not to answer the door, that the monster would get me. I followed my gut instinct and disobeyed. The police questioned my mother and I. They seemed concerned when I told them about the monster. I thought perhaps they had dealt with it before. Instead, they took me away from Mother. They told me it would just be for a few nights whilst they investigate. Mother is sick. She can't be left alone, especially not when the monster is here. It already got Auntie Cheryl. But they did it anyway. They insisted that Mother would be taken care of if she needed care. I felt terrible. Mother was all alone, and it was my fault. I shouldn't have gotten the police involved. I had caused all of this. I never saw Auntie Cheryl again, but the police did find her body. It was in a lake nearby to our house. They said that based on her corpse, she had been dead for quite a few years. So it wasn't possible that I had ever spoken to her since I was 6. They also asked me if I knew anything about the trap door leading from the living room to Mother's bedroom. I told them I did not. I only see Mother when I visit her in prison now. I live alone at my own place. At night, I still walk down the stairs quietly to be sure the monster never gets me. Living in the suburbs has always made me feel a little uneasy. The uncanny copy-pasting of houses, as if they arrive as a prefab on the back of a truck, stuck down, every house a clone of those adjacent. When you live in a neighborhood like mine, you start to feel like the people living inside those houses are from the same factory, too. Reality is all too often tamed by an engineer's blueprint. One morning, while sipping my coffee and taking in the silence, it occurred to me. Something that felt so particularly strange about the area. It was so simple, Something so recognizable that I have to question why I never noticed it sooner. The emptiness that swallowed the space. The lack of shade. The answer hiding in plain sight. Almost asking to be acknowledged. There were no trees. It's not uncommon for greenery to be sparse in areas like this. Everything is built so fast these days, there's no time for nature to get in the way. But you'll see trees towering along the side of the road, blocking the hum of traffic driving by. You'll still find shrubbery, large or small, defining a border between homes. Flora, tucked between the man-made concrete, exists not because someone has made it so, but because nature implored. Where was that? I glanced out the window, hoping to be proven wrong. Surely, I thought, surely there must be something, somewhere, having escaped my mind. The lack of earth stared back at me. Gray concrete, wooden fences, white painted houses, each the same blueprint. The pristine of each yard only looked so because it was fake. Grass made of plastic, made not in soil, but in a factory. The sun shone down, but it felt wasted here, like a beautiful frame with no portrait inside. Had it always been this way? Was there a time when the yards were full of natural shelter? Had the sunrise been accompanied by the sounds of birds singing? Could you catch a glimpse of squirrels scattering up the bark, narrowly avoiding running straight into the bottom side of a birdhouse? I heard the stairs creaking as my husband came downstairs, an hour later than myself, as usual. "Good morning, babe." I almost didn't reply, finding myself lost in curiosity. "Honey," I spoke whilst staring out the window, "where's the nearest tree?" Silence, followed by a slight laughter. "The nearest tree?" "Yes." I turned to face him. "There isn't a single tree on this street, and I can't even remember the last time I saw one without leaving town." He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. He closed his lips together, pouting slightly as he thought. "I'm not sure." "That's very strange." His concern turned to me. "Babe, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." In a way, I had. The phantom remains of nature was present all around us. All the trees chopped down to make our fences being the most basic example. But I didn't want to seem insane, so I dropped it. Yeah, just found it odd. It plagued my mind all day. I can't place my finger on why it affected me so deeply. Perhaps it was the fact that it remained unspoken. Why had nobody else ever noticed? Or, at the very least, never mentioned this oddity? Was I simply turning this into a larger issue than it actually was? My questions wanted answers. And I could see one of my neighbors, Edith, walking down the pavement. Edith is a lovely lady. She's lived alone since her partner passed away. But that was before I ever lived here. She speaks a lot about Mike. I wish I could have met him. He sounds like a great man. She has no family to look after her. But despite her age, she gets on perfectly fine living alone. She's strong. And she's often inspired me to be stronger. I opened the front door, acting as though I was just leaving the house, and spotted her. Edith! I smiled as I walked over to her.
Oh, how lovely to see you, dear.
Her voice always warms me to hear. Being alone most of the day, she always appreciates a long social interaction. We spoke for a while, catching up with one another. She said that she didn't want to waste the beautiful weather, and that Mike would always take advantage of it. She never exactly got any closure with him. His cause of death was never discovered. He was found in the bushes a few towns over, covered in his own blood, despite no visible wounds. I've never pried deeper. I only talk about it when she brings up the topic. As things felt like they were wrapping up, I changed the subject. Edith, have you ever noticed? I felt nervous to mention it, but I wasn't sure why. Have you ever noticed that there aren't any trees around? I gestured at the houses as I looked around, as if it were even possible to point directly at a lack of something. Glancing back at Edith, her head was tilted slightly as she stared back at me.
Come again, dear? No trees? What do you mean?
I felt a little silly, almost wondering if I had missed some, somehow blind to them. There aren't any trees, are there? I questioned even myself. She stared at me, not responding. At first, I thought she was having the same realization as myself. But the silence grew longer uncomfortably long. There are no trees. I began to clarify my point again. Anything to fill the empty air. Her face seemed to drop. She looked directly into my eyes as her irises dilated. She held that eye contact for just a moment before she frantically started to look around.
Where are the trees?
She mumbled between quick flicks of her head. Hey, Edith, look at me. I held her arm to support her as she stumbled. I almost wish she hadn't looked at me again. The stillness in her eyes as her lips trembled. It haunts me. Her skin had gone pale, and she began to buckle at the knees.
Where did they go?
She cried, screaming now.
Where did they all go?
Her head tilted up slightly, as if trying to catch a glimpse of the towering trees that simply were not there. Only clear skies. Other neighbors on the street started to peek out their windows or doors. Some rushed out to help her. One held her under the arms, slowly lowering her to the curb, allowing her to sit. Another knelt down beside her. Edith, are you okay? He asked her.
Trees. No trees.
These were the only words I could make out between incoherent messes. The man looked at me. What did you say to her? A fit of anger in his voice. Why would he immediately blame me? I don't know. I couldn't find the words. I spoke about how few trees there are, and she started panicking. I felt terrible. I didn't mean for this to happen. This onset of fear I had given her. The two men stood her up, walking her to her house. I tried to follow, but one held his hand up to me with the palm open. I think you should leave. I would have fought my case. I was concerned for her and wanted to help. But I felt like I had little to stand on, given that I was the cause of her state. I returned home and told my husband about what had just happened. He was just as puzzled as myself. That night, I struggled to sleep. The only thoughts on my mind were about Edith. And still, the lack of trees. Given the silence outside, it was like a knife cutting cleanly through the air when the silence changed into something else. Wind? No. A mumbling? Maybe? What was it? I stood up and looked out the window. I couldn't see any source of the noise. opening the window quietly. It was louder now. Still quiet, but loud enough that I could have a sense of its direction. Directly below, leaning out the window slightly, I could see them. A person stood outside our front door, speaking. The volume was low enough to keep the voice ambiguous. Just a steady flow of mumbling sounds, with vague words that could just be made out. Branch. And unseen. The same sentence, whatever it was, being repeated, like a broken record player. I listened very carefully, urging myself to find the meaning. Finally, I could make it out. The unseen branch blesses this place. The unseen branch blesses this place. My husband woke up. I heard the sheets moving a little behind me. "What's that noise?" His words croaked through his tired, half-asleep state. I glanced at him, opening my mouth to answer, before noticing the chanting had stopped. Looking back, I could see the figure running away. They seemed to disappear, their inky black clothes making it easy to quickly lose them to the night. In the morning, I found myself just staring out the window. The lack of sleep, haunting terror from Edith, and the oddity encountered in the night, all combined into a horrid sense of impending doom. My husband tried to comfort me, but his explanations fell onto ears too curious to accept his solutions. It was probably some idiot teen. Edith is old. Things like that happen sometimes. I'm sure there are trees somewhere in town. His intentions were good. He meant well. He just couldn't see the bigger picture. All of this had to fit together. I knew it. I couldn't see the bigger picture either, but I could see the jigsaw making it up. I just had to put it together. Towards midday, I left the house and made my way 2 doors down to Edith's home. I wanted to apologize for the previous day. The walk felt the longest it ever had. Every step, I felt like eyes were on me. The fear gripped tight at my chest. I was acutely aware of the unnatural environment. Still, somewhere that had once felt like home now felt like a fake augmentation of reality. I considered turning back, but I knew this would only consume me further. Perhaps I should have just gone home. Perhaps ignorance is bliss. Approaching Edith's door, I stood for a moment, considering whether to knock. Even as I lifted a hand up, fist closed, I still paused. Eventually, after a deep breath, I tapped 3 times. Then 3 more. Then 3 more. Each wave of knocks had a few minutes between, yet no answer. Edith is always home at this time, having her lunch. I knew this wasn't right. Had I been in a better state of mind, I probably wouldn't have thought too much of it. But this was too much at once. Testing my luck, I pulled the handle down. The door was unlocked. Walked with surprisingly less apprehension than the knocking had taken. I opened the door and stepped inside. Edith? I called out as I walked down her short hallway. I had never actually been inside her home. Most of the walls were covered in photos. An entire life, all displayed upon these walls. In many of the younger photos, she's with a man. I assumed this to be Mike. Walking into her kitchen, I see her fridge door wide open. The light spills to the floor as the gentle hum fills the room. On the counter lay an envelope with my name written in pen. I would never open somebody else's mail, but this was addressed to me. It's my own mail. I also thought that perhaps Edith may have written something that could help me find her. The envelope wasn't sealed. I could see the paper poking out with something printed onto it. I carefully took it out, my eyes taking a few seconds to understand what I was looking at. Edith, clearly recognizable, her clothes soaked in blood. She lay in a bush, thinly cramped between the foliage and prickly twigs. The leaves seemed to surround her, as though the bush itself hadn't been disturbed. Like putting an object into a box without ever opening it. My heart rate picked up, almost beating through my chest. My trembling hands couldn't hold the paper steady. Feeling tears forming in my eyes, I wiped them away so that I could make out the sentence written underneath. Don't break the branch that feeds you.